When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
Welcome to Accelerate Your Business Growth,
where we're exploring all sorts of business topics. Experts from around the world join me, your host, Diane Helbig, for a conversation where they share their expertise with all of you. Take what you need when you need it. Featured on Inc.com, Forbes, and MSNBC's Your Business, this podcast is recognized as one of the best podcasts for small business, sales, leadership, social media, and more. When it comes to business, Accelerate Your Business Growth has got it covered. And now on with the show.
My guest today is Kelly Fennell. Kelly is the president of Memphis-based Executive Financial Services, a leading ESOP consultant and sought-after speaker. He regularly speaks about employee ownership at conferences and meetings throughout the U.S., London, and Sydney, Australia. He's the author of The ESOP Coach, Using ESOPs in Ownership Succession Planning, which is a highly acclaimed resource to business owners exploring an ESOP transition. Kelly graduated magna cum laude from the University of Memphis and its law school. Thanks so much for joining me today, Kelly.
Diane, it's great to be here with you.
I'm thrilled to have you here. I don't think we have ever had a guest talk about ESOPs, so this will be great because so many people have no idea what they are. So I'm going to ask you to start by explaining what an employee stock ownership plan is and basically how it works, please.
Yeah. Well, it's really two things in one. For a business owner, an ESOP is a way for that owner to cash in on their life's work. Some business owners sell to private equity, some sell to competitors, and most business owners, unfortunately, aren't aware that there's a third option. Yeah. And that is a sale to their employees via an ESOP, with the government paying for much of the cost of that sale via the tax benefits that it offers. So for a business owner, an ESOP is a liquidity strategy. For a company's employees, a business owner is an equity-based retirement plan. So it's a first cousin to a 401k plan, except for the employees in a 401k plan where they invest in an offering of mutual funds. With an ESOP, either all or almost all of their retirement account is invested in the stock of the company that they work for.
Wow. Okay. So I think I understand the tax benefits to the employees. What are the tax benefits to the employer? You said it's a liquidation. So what is that? How does that work?
Well, for a company, an ESOP gives a way for a business owner to have their company operate as if it were a church or a synagogue. So
Really?
Believe it or not, if you have a 100% ESOP-owned company, that company will operate on a tax-free basis. Oh. There will be no tax at the company level because the company will elect to be taxed as an S corporation, which is a pass-through entity. So in an S corporation, whether it's ESOP owned or not, the company doesn't pay tax. But in most S corporations, the company passes its income through to its taxable owner, and the owner pays the tax. With an ESOP owned S corporation, no tax at the company level, and when the company passes its income through to its owner, the owner is the ESOP trustee, and under the law, trustees of retirement plans, whether that's a 401k plan or an ESOP, those owners are tax exempt. So if you have a company that doesn't pay tax and it passes its income through to its sole owner, which is a tax exempt entity, you end up with Publix supermarkets, which is the largest ESOP owned company in the country, covering about 300,000 employees and their beneficiaries. And Publix competes very well with Kroger's because Kroger's pays tax and Publix doesn't.
Wow, I had no idea. That is fascinating.
And so
Wow.
if a business owner is going to sell their company to their employees, if they do it the traditional way, no tax benefits, no help from Uncle Sam. But if they sell to their employees using an ESOP, then they get a 40% tax subsidy. And so it's far less expensive and more cost effective and more financially efficient to use the ESOP as that method for an internal transition.
Wow. Okay, this is so interesting. So, what are some common misconceptions about ESOPs?
Well, I think the first one is that if I sell to an ESOP, the employees are going to run the company, that they are going to elect management and they are going to establish a committee, and that committee is going to run my business. And that couldn't be further from the truth. When you sell to an ESOP, the shareholder becomes the ESOP trustee, and that trustee is going to elect the officers and the directors of the company. Actually, the trustee is not going to elect the officers. It's going to elect the directors, the corporate board of directors, and they're going to appoint the officers of the company. And so that trustee is very likely in almost every situation to appoint the company's or elect the company's existing board as the successor board. And so it's going to be that board, which probably is going to consist of our current owner who sells to the ESOP, as well as the CFO and perhaps one other person. Likely that person will be an outside independent director, and that will be the company's board, and they will make decisions for the strategic operation of the company, and they will hire and fire company management. So that's probably the biggest misconception, that the employees will run the business. That would be untenable. And if that were the case, there'd be virtually no ESOPs out there because companies couldn't afford to run and operate by committee.
Right.
I guess the second biggest misconception about ESOPs is that as a seller, I would have to take a haircut on the price if I sold to an ESOP, as opposed to selling to private equity. I've been doing this, Diane, 43 years, and we've never had a situation where a business owner sold for less to an ESOP than they would to private equity.
Really?
An ESOP is allowed to pay the maximum amount that a financial buyer would pay. Now, granted, that might be less than what a strategic buyer, such as a competitor, would pay.
Okay.
If you're comparing an ESOP to most of the buyers that are out there, which are financial buyers, such as private equity, an ESOP can pay at least as much.
I feel like that's so interesting. I feel like if someone had a choice between private equity and an ESOP, they would want to do an ESOP.
They often do, but there are some disadvantages to selling to an ESOP. So I'm not one of these people who, just because I have a hammer, I think everything's a nail. ESOPs don't work for everybody. So, for example, if you have a situation where a business owner wants to do what I call take the money and run, sell their company, get all of their cash at close, and literally go to the beach, then that's probably not a good candidate for an ESOP. With an ESOP, the owner receives a down payment of cash when they sell, and then they receive a promissory note that pays them out over a period of time. Let's call it 5 years.
Okay.
And so if a business owner needs to take the money and run, an ESOP's probably not the right strategy.
Right.
If a business owner wants a gradual glide path to retirement and to the exit from their company, which many business owners do, then an ESOP can be a great strategy. I have a good friend who, when he was selling his company, told me, "Look, Kelly, my wife told me that she married me to have dinner, not lunch." So he wanted to cash in on his life's work and sell his company, but he wanted to have something to do. He didn't want to play golf 5 days a week, and he didn't want to hang around the house and disrupt the continuity of the rhythm of the house. And so he wanted to stay involved in this company. He wanted to cash out and stay involved, and ESOP is the perfect solution in that situation.
Yeah, right. I get it. Okay. So what does it look like? Like, what does that process look like if someone says, okay, I'm going to transition this thing to an ESOP?
Well, the first thing that happens is business owners typically would do some research on the internet and find out about ESOPs. They might go to Amazon and buy my book that you mentioned, the ESOP Coach, and get a little education about what an ESOP is and how it works. One of the things about my book is business owners, I think, learn best from case studies. And so there's 6 or 7 case studies in there, and most business owners will identify with at least one of those. So that's often how they start. And then they have questions. And so they'll hire somebody like us to answer their questions and then do what's called a feasibility analysis, where we would show them the details applied to their specific situation, their company's financial situation, and the particular owner's goals and objectives. And that feasibility study will give them all of the information that they need in order to make an informed decision as to whether an ESOP might be right for them.
Okay.
If they decide that it is, they'll hire that firm that did the feasibility study to implement the transaction for them. That'll take about 4 months, and then they'll have an ESOP-owned company.
I see. 4 months? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, it takes about 4 months to implement.
It's not very long.
Yeah, it's not very long. It might take 2 months to work through the feasibility study. So it might be a 6-month process, which is probably half as long as it might take to sell to a third party.
Okay. Okay. So what are some of the challenges or considerations you think a business owner should be aware of when they're implementing an ESOP?
Yeah, there are some financial metrics
Okay.
that a business owner would want to consider. So I say that ESOPs are right for small to mid-size private companies, but aren't right for micro-size companies because ESOPs are expensive. There are a lot of lawyers involved, and whenever that happens, it's an expensive transaction. It's not as expensive as selling to a third party, but it's still a lot of money to implement an ESOP. So the first financial metric often is that the company needs to have at least $1 million of what's called adjusted EBITDA. So EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And so that is a proxy for a company's cash flow. And when somebody's buying a company, that's what they're purchasing, is that company's future cash flow. So adjusted EBITDA is what valuation will be based on. And it's also what the company's financing of the ESOP transaction will be based on. And so the company needs to have around at least 1 million of adjusted EBITDA, probably needs to have at least 25 employees. And those employees need to have total compensation, excluding the compensation of the owner, of at least $1 million.
Huh.
So over the last 3 years, just to give you some data points, we've done 25 transactions. The largest was for a company that had $56 million of adjusted EBITDA. So that was a big business.
Yeah.
The smallest one was for a company that had 1.4 million. The median was 4 million of adjusted EBITDA and 95 employees. And so that is the profile of the typical ESOP candidate.
That's so interesting. Okay. That's very helpful. Now, a question that comes to my mind is about company culture. Does an ESOP impact a company's culture in any way?
Well, yes. And, we had talked about the financial metrics that are key indicators of whether or not an ESOP might be appropriate. The non-financial metric, the key one, is company culture. So if I talk to a business owner during a first meeting, I'm going to ask them, what are the keys to your company's success? And if that business owner says that, well, my people are my number one key, and the culture that we've built really is critical to our success. It impacts our employees and it impacts our customers. If a business owner tells me that, I know that if they satisfy those financial metrics I mentioned, that they're a really good candidate for an ESOP. If you are in discussions to sell to a third party, that third party is always going to tell you, if we buy your company, nothing's going to change. Exactly right. That is one of the biggest lies that's ever been told. If they buy you and pay for you, they own you, and they're going to control company culture, and that company culture will be destined to change. If culture is really important to the owner, and if the owner wants to make sure that that culture is maintained, the only way to do that is through an internal transition. And as I mentioned earlier, an ESOP is the most financially efficient internal transition because of the tremendous tax breaks that are available.
Do the employees weigh in on whether they want this or not? Is it transparent to them?
It is transparent to them, but they don't weigh in on whether or not they want it because the ESOP doesn't cost them anything. They don't invest their own money. And that's one of the real beauties of an ESOP. I talk to a lot of business owners who tell me that they would like for their employees to own their company, but they say the employees don't have the cash or the credit to be able to purchase it.
Right.
And so if the employees don't have to come up with that, but it's financed by the company with this 40% tax subsidy, then it gives you a way to maintain company culture. Employees don't have to come out of pocket. The company pays for it with this big assist from Uncle Sam.
And what happens at the point where the owner who sold to the ESOP decides he doesn't want to be involved in the company anymore? So he's not part of the board or, whatever. Like, what happens then?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so in our business, we see two things happen often simultaneously. One is the ownership transition, which is effectuated by the ESOP. But the other thing that, if it hasn't happened already, needs to happen in connection with this is a management transition. And so I often say that ESOPs work best where the boss comes in late, takes a long lunch, and leaves early, because the boss has delegated responsibility for the day-to-day management of that company to the successor management team. And so if you have that situation, then the boss has been making strategic decisions, but when the boss is ready to go, he or she has the people in place to take over. Now, if they've not already done that management transition, then that can happen in connection with the ESOP. And so oftentimes, if that transition hasn't happened yet because the boss has been holding on and now they're ready to release some of that control, then the ESOP and the management transition can take place at the same time. And now you've got a powerful story to tell your successor management team. Most owners have always asked their employees to think like owners, but they've never treated them like owners.
Right.
And if they treat them like owners by giving them stock in their ESOP account,
Yeah.
then that provides a great incentive and opportunity for that cream to rise to the top and for that successor management team to act like owners because they're being treated like owners.
Right. Right. That makes so much sense to me. If so if someone's listening to this and they're thinking that they think they hit some of the parameters that you had mentioned before, and they're just, not sure if an ESOP is the right move for them, what advice would you give them outside of, buying your book, which I think is a great idea, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But what else? Is there some sort of like deep dive they can do?
Yeah, I'll offer 3 ways for them to learn more. I'll start with the selfish approach, which is to go to our website, execfin.com. We've got lots of educational material on there. You can download something called the Ownership Succession Guide, which is a summary of the first chapter of my book, which gives an overview of what an ESOP is, how it works, and its tax benefits.
Okay.
There also are 2 ESOP industry associations. The ESOP Association of America, which is based in DC, and it is largely a legislative lobbying group, but they've got some good information on their website. The better industry association for educational information is called the National Center for Employee Ownership. Their website is nceo.org, and they have tons of great educational information, some of which is for lawyers and bankers and CPAs, but most of it is for business owners, and it's written in plain business owner English.
Nice. Wow, those are great. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I'll make sure that the Ownership Successor Guide is in the show notes as well. So, with the link to your website. Yeah. And the book will be too. Boy, Kelly, this is so interesting. I mean, I said at the beginning of this that we'd never had a conversation about this on this podcast. And I'm sorry that is the case, but I'm so glad that I'm talking to you now because it's enlightening. I had no idea that anything about them really. I knew they existed. I just didn't really know what it was all about. And I think that it's really valuable for the listeners as well. So thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it very much, Diane.
I'm glad. Thank you. And listeners, thank you. You are who we're doing this for. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Accelerate Your Business Growth, a production of Evergreen Podcasts.
Discover more episodes of this podcast and explore others at evergreenpodcast.com. As always, continue to prosper and be curious. And if you're looking to get your sales strategy headed in the right direction, pick up a copy of Succeed Without Selling on Amazon or wherever books are sold. Until we meet again on another episode of Accelerate Your Business Growth, goodbye and good day.
Do you love news about LinkedIn, Indeed, Google, and just about every other recruitment tech company out there?
Hell yeah. I'm Chad.
I'm Cheese.
We're the Chad and Cheese Podcast.
All the latest recruiting news and insights are on our show.
Dripping in snark and attitude.
Subscribe today wherever you listen to your podcasts.
We out.